Live from London, this is BBC News. The bodies of 6 hostages have been recovered by Israeli forces in Gaza. US President Joe Biden says Hamas will pay, with one of those found an American citizen. The mass rollout of polio vaccines is beginning in Gaza. Humanitarian agencies aiming to vaccinate more than 600,000 children over the coming days. Calculating support for the far right in Germany. Voters in the country's east head to the polls on what could forecast the outcome of next year's federal election. And airports across Europe reintroduce carry-on liquid restrictions. So what will it take to see the end of the rule? Hello, I'm Catherine Biarahanga. We start in Gaza, where the Israeli military has confirmed that 6 bodies found in a tunnel in the city of Rafah in Gaza were those of hostages held by Hamas after the October the 7th attack. It's named them as Israelis Alexander Lobanov, Almog Sarusi, Eden Yerushlami, Ori Danino, Carmel Gat, and Hirsch Goldberg Polin, who was an American citizen. He had appeared in a Hamas video with an amputated arm a few months ago. In a statement, President Biden called his death tragic and reprehensible, saying Hamas leaders will pay for their crimes. The Missing Families Forum has again urged the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to agree to a ceasefire for the release of the remaining hostages. Elsewhere, 3 Israelis have died when the vehicle was fired on near the city of Hebron in the occupied West Bank. Well, with me now is Mohamed Taha from BBC Arabic. And Mohamed, we have been following over the past few hours this news of the hostages who were recovered, the bodies of hostages recovered from Gaza by the Israeli military. What is the military saying about the operation to recover them?
Now the military in Israel are saying that they found them in a tunnel in Rafah. They found them during normal operation, so they didn't get intelligence information that there were hostages or bodies there. They found them. They accused Hamas of killing them, and they vowed that they will retaliate so hard against them. The new thing that we have now a statement from Hamas about the incident. They accused Israel by killing them in an Israeli shelling. And they also said that President Biden also is responsible for that because of his support to Israel. And what they said, his support to what they described as a genocide war in Gaza. And they invited President Biden to practice pressure on Israel to reach a hostage deal. In Israel, there are many developments in Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was supposed to go to a primary school to open the new education year. He cancelled this visit. And in Israel, there is a strike in the secondary school responding to the movement of the families of the remaining hostages or all hostages. And there is a call for a massive strike in Israel today to call for a ceasefire deal. There are also statements from the Israeli Defense Minister Gallant, who invited the Israeli government to withdraw their decision that they took on Thursday, that they will not leave Philadelphia corridor between Egypt and Gaza. This decision, he said that it was against the negotiating process at the moment, because if they will decide this, Hamas would never ever release any hostages. And an Israeli minister said, and this was reported by the Israeli newspaper Yedi'at Ahronot, that unless a deal would be reached, there will no longer any hostages alive in 1 month. But on the other hand, on the right-wing side, in the Israeli side, the finance minister Smotrich said that we will destroy Hamas and we will return the hostages. And Itamar Ben-Gvir was busy not with the hostages today, but he went to Tarqumia in the West Bank, where 3 police personnel were killed.
Yes, and we'll be speaking to you about some of those developments in a little while. Just stay with us, Mohamed. Let's turn to our Middle East correspondent, John Donnison, who joins us from Jerusalem. And John, Mohamed there was talking to us about some of the reaction there in Israel, the pressure on the Prime Minister. On the one hand, from the families of the hostages who are urging him to reach a ceasefire deal, but also from some of his coalition partners who say he should continue with the military operation. Just talk us through how things stand at the moment.
Well, yeah, Mohamed gave a pretty good assessment of the divisions within Israeli society about how the war is being conducted in Gaza. And it's not just the public and the families of hostages who've been critical of Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. We've also had people within the military saying that they believe that the best way to get a large number of the remaining hostages out of Gaza, and we think there are between 60 and 70 still alive, is to do a comprehensive ceasefire deal. Even Israel's defense minister, Yoav Gallant, is reported to have been in a shouting match, frankly, with the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in the last few days over how many troops should be left in Gaza, something which is blocking a hostage and ceasefire release deal. So the families of some of those hostage remaining, well, they say they are in mourning today, but they have also been very critical of Mr. Netanyahu, saying that the bodies of those 6 hostages released today would still have been, those people would still have been alive if a deal had been done.
And as you mentioned there, the reaction from the families of the hostages who've been held in Gaza. Do you think perhaps as we see these developments of, bodies that have been recovered from Gaza, that perhaps there is increasing pressure on the government there in Israel? Could this be a watershed moment, or do you think the Prime Minister will continue with his operation as it is?
I'm not sure it will be a watershed moment. There is already an enormous amount of pressure, not just from the hostage families, but also from the international community who have been pushing for a comprehensive ceasefire and hostage release deal for Gaza for weeks, if not months now. Now, we had these 6 bodies recovered today. We had another 6 bodies recovered last week. So there is a growing sentiment in Israel that, that Israel's ongoing military operation is jeopardizing the lives of those hostages. But the Prime Minister is adamant that the best way to secure their release is military pressure on Hamas and negotiations.
And John, you continue to follow developments in the occupied West Bank as well. And we're hearing developments from near the city of Hebron. Just bring us up to date as to what's happening there.
Yeah, well, for the last 4 or 5 days, there have been intensified Israeli military operations in the north of the West Bank, in big Palestinian cities there. Israel says it's been carrying out counter-terrorism operations against Palestinian militants who want to carry out attacks on Israel. At least 20 people have been killed in the north of the West Bank in the last few days. Overnight, in the south of the West Bank, near the Palestinian city of Hebron, which is the biggest Palestinian city in the West Bank, it's been confirmed that 3 Israeli police officers have been shot dead in an attack close to a junction near the city.
John, thank you. That's our Middle East correspondent, John Donnison, live in Jerusalem there. Well, meanwhile, UN officials and local health workers are preparing to roll out a massive vaccination program for polio in Gaza that will rely on a series of limited pauses in fighting between Israeli forces and Hamas fighters. The World Health Organization says it will need to vaccinate at least 90% of children under 10 for the campaign to succeed. Its campaign was organized after a 10-month-old baby was partially paralyzed by the first case of the virus in 2 decades. On Saturday, medics vaccinated children at one hospital in a symbolic move ahead of the official campaign. From Jerusalem, our Middle East correspondent Yolande Nell reports.
Just 2 drops. As the UN begins vaccinating against polio in Gaza, a dose is easy to give. But carrying out a mass immunisation campaign in a combat zone is a huge challenge. Parents of the first vaccinated children are relieved.
I was worried and afraid because this is scary, the polio disease. This disease makes the children unable to move.
Baby Abdul Rahman was crawling early, but now his mum worries he'll never be able to walk. He was the first child found to have polio in Gaza in 25 years, and it paralysed his leg. Because of the war, he wasn't vaccinated, and now medical care is limited.
Aboud wants to live and be treated. He wants to live and walk like other children. I feel a lot of guilt that he didn't get the vaccination, but I couldn't give it to him because of our circumstances.
Displaced 5 times, the baby's family now lives in a crowded tent camp in Deir al-Balah in central Gaza. Raw sewage flows through streets nearby. Conditions are ideal for diseases to spread, especially polio, which is highly infectious. Since discovering the virus, UN agencies have been racing to set up an emergency mass vaccination programme. And with war raging, they've negotiated 3 localised 3-day pauses in fighting with Israel and Hamas. UN officials say the plan is not ideal, but it's workable.
What we are aiming at is to have 640,000 children below the age of 10 vaccinated in just a few days in the Gaza Strip. We need to reach at least 90%. Without that, there is a risk that the virus would mutate and that the transmission could continue.
Children make up nearly half the population of Gaza, and the past year has deprived many of their loved ones, their homes and health. With no end in sight to the war, the hope is that at least one new source of suffering can be eliminated. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, still with me in the studio is Mohamed Taha from BBC Arabic. And Mohamed, the pause in fighting was meant to have started about an hour and 10 minutes ago in order for these vaccinations to begin. How is it going?
Let me bring this breaking news for you, Catherine. There are at least two shelling in Gaza happened by the Israeli forces, one in Al-Brej refugee camp, and one person was killed, at least, according to the health authorities in Gaza, and another shelling in Al-Shija'iyya in the eastern part of the city of Gaza, and another person was killed.
Did they affect the pause in fighting? Because it was meant to be in the central part of Gaza today.
Of course, Al-Brej is in the center part of Gaza, practically this pause of fighting is not happening. There is no pause of fighting. After 1 hour, there are 2 shelling. That means that around 2,000 people who are involved in the polio campaign in Gaza has to risk their lives to do their work.
Just a reminder of just how tricky this process is, but I imagine the aid agencies would want to find a way to continue with the vaccination program. Do you think that's possible?
Of course, as you did the interview with the UN, Louise, the UN official earlier this morning, Catherine, the people working there are really determined for this rollout to happen. Otherwise, they are risking the lives of 600,000 children in Gaza.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
That's
Catherine.
Mohamed Taha from BBC Arabic. Thank you for your analysis.
Thank you, Catherine.
Airport